Hey FemFreq Radio listeners, it's summertime and up here in the Northern Hemisphere things are pretty hot. Why not soothe your weary minds by dipping into the Patreon community where all the cool FemFreakers hang out. You get early access to new episodes, bonus tomfoolery from me, Carolyn, and Anita, merch discounts, listener polls, and the occasional surprise treat. You'll also get the chance to pat yourself on the back for supporting feminist pop culture analysis. If you want to be part of transforming the entertainment landscape, then support like yours is crucial to making sure that progressive voices are heard and challenging criticism finds a platform. Head on over to patreon.com/femfreak and sign up at any level to show your commitment to being critical of the media you love.
Whoa. What?
I'm telling you, I love globes, right?
Yeah.
So, okay. Hey-o.
I didn't even know
pull
that.
out the Ebony loves globes and make that the teaser.
Welcome to Feminist Frequency Radio Retro Edition. This is a show that asks you to be critical of the media you love. I'm Anita Sarkeesian, and I'm joined today by a fake Libyan on the hunt for her stolen plutonium, Ebony Adams.
Why are you always stealing my plutonium, Anita?
Because I want to go to the past so I can go back to the future.
Better you than me. I'm not going back to the 50s as a black woman.
Yeah, we've all read Octavia Butler. We've all read that shit.
And if you haven't, you need to.
Yeah, you do. Oh God, that book is so good. Okay. Joining us today to eat peanut brittle around the dinner table is friend of the podcast, Teddy Dief.
Hello.
What's up, Teddy?
I am back. I am back on the podcast. I'm back.
You're like a regular now.
I don't remember what happened after that.
Yes.
Are you just joining the cat pod now? You're just a regular?
Sure. I don't know.
I would love it. Even if you wouldn't be in the studio, but if you just sent in like updates from the field, that would be fantastic.
Yeah, I like to be kind of like off topic, but still helpful.
Yeah. All right. Well, if you haven't guessed from the intro, today's episode, we're talking about the film You, which is only you is speaking to our patrons, not you who do not give us money.
But we love you just the same.
Dude, not the same? Just the same?
Yes, because people cannot buy my love.
That's
not for
true.
$20 a month.
I mean, I've tried. It's true. I have tried. Ebony doesn't care. Okay, whatever. We love all of you. You're great. But anyways, the patrons decided that when we gave them a poll on time travel movies, that Back to the Future was gonna be it.
Yeah.
So let's go back to the past with some racism and sexism. Pew!
Cool.
All right.
We love an on-the-nose lyric choice for
Yeah, we
music.
do. Yeah, we do.
All right, Teddy, for folks who did not listen to last week's episode about White
Trash.
Lotus, why don't you tell us who you are, what you do?
Oh, hi. I'm Teddy Dief. I'm a game designer, director, writer, singer. Worked on a game called Hyper Light Drifter, some people may know. And now I'm working on a game called We Are OFK, which is about the band OFK. And it's coming out in January. And we have a song out now, Follow Unfollow by OFK. And I learned yesterday that if you Google OFK, we're like the thing now. So you just have to Google 3 letters.
You got to own
SEO.
that SEO space.
Mm-hmm.
Good job.
Does OFK stand for anything? OnlyFans killers?
Whoa. It's one of those, like, we choose to let people interpret how they will, but also the series kind of shows our hand for our reasoning. So.
Okay, so it is OnlyFans killers. Got it.
I'm nodding.
Yes.
So this is not a visual medium.
I have received confirmation. Cool. Teddy, thank you for coming back.
Thank you for having me.
Last episode, when we talked about White Lotus, we wrapped up and Anita was like, oh, blah, blah, blah. I'm Anita. I hate everything. Next week, we're talking about Back to the Future. And I'm like, how could you be mad at that? And I was, low key like, oh, this will be fun. And you also expressed a modicum of energy about the film Back to the Future.
I did.
In the week, in the short time since we have spoken to you, whatever I meant to say about Back to the Future dropped right out of my brain. I got nothing. Absolutely nothing.
So that said, Ebony, why don't you read your really robust, riveting intro to this movie that you wrote?
Oh, yeah, right on. We're skipping the extended intro for today's episode because what do you need to know? It's Back to the Future. It's an 80s classic. You made us watch it, you weirdos. Anita hated it. Let's go.
What?
P.S. I WhatsApped Anita earlier and was like, I don't have anything to say about this movie. And she was like, let me help you out. You don't need to write like a big script for this because P.S. I'm also not going to read it in advance. So why waste the time?
But she really did. Was like, I don't know what to say. I was like, Back to the Future. If you haven't heard about it, then you probably aren't listening to this episode anyways.
Right.
I feel like we don't really need to preface it. We're gonna get into it. But yeah. So this is a movie I think I saw once, like at some point in my life. I don't think I watched it as a kid, but I watched it at some point.
Sure.
Were you born when this came out?
What year did it come out?
I want to say 85. You know,
Yes.
we should know this. This tells you the amount of preparation we're willing to do.
Oh, wait, before we do that, I feel self-conscious about this. We, I was
85.
the whole Patreon versus like people who give money, don't give money. We're not trying to be classist up in here. So like your
it's all jokes. It's all jokes.
Yeah. So I just had a moment of being like, we appreciate all of you. And we super appreciate the people who help us make the podcast so that everybody has access to it. That's how crowdfunding works.
If you take an hour out of your precious time on this earth to listen to this podcast, that's payment, like you're already doing stuff for us.
Okay, so if it was made in 1985, then yes, I have been created at that point.
Okay.
But we have no fucking idea. So
The movie spends a lot of time showing a close-up of a clock that says 1985, which is where it comes from.
Clearly
I just
we don't
realized
remember.
as we were trying to decide this. And it goes back to 55, right? So,
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh,
okay,
yeah.
So, but this is such a culturally iconic movie, right? Like the DeLorean, everybody knows the DeLorean as the like Back to the Future car. There's so many lines in this movie and things about it that like are just so. It's one of those movies that if you hadn't actually ever seen it, you kind of have seen
You've
it.
kind of seen it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I was just going to say that, to give you some sense of how unsettling it was to rewatch this, if we were to recreate Back to the Future now, we would be going back to 1991. Hey, yo, that was 30 years ago.
Yeah.
So sit on
interesting.
that. Yeah. Yeah.
So, this movie is really racist and really sexist and kind of fucked up.
Anita, break it down for us.
I mean, it's part of the conversation. But before we get there, I would like to share with you a couple of choice things. One, one of my childhood friends loved this movie so much that she named her dog Lorraine.
Wow.
Which I think is funny.
Okay.
Interesting. Yeah.
The line "make like a tree and get out of here" is probably my favorite.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Those are the two the tidbits you wanted to share with the audience?
Well, that aren't about like why this movie is terrible.
Okay.
That's it. Is that not good? Were those not good? They probably weren't very good.
No,
Well,
they're
that's what you
fine.
got. Hey, didn't I buy you that clock?
The Doctor Who clock that the audience cannot see?
Yeah,
you
I
absolutely
just
did.
noticed it.
Yeah.
I'm so cool.
You are very,
such a good
very
friend.
cool.
I bought Ebony a Doctor Who clock. I don't remember why or when or how.
Because you're my
but-
friend, dummy. And also, there's a giant Dalek on my wall that Anita let me borrow. She did not give me this. I have to give it back when she moves into her palatial, mansion when she finally buys one. But for right now, it is in my keeping. It is a gorgeous, huge Dalek poster.
I do this with things. I will be like, here's this thing that I had for a while and I still love, but I don't have any reason for it. And I think you'd love it more, but I'm not giving it to you.
Right.
You just get to have it. I will never ask for that back from Ebony. It has this ornate frame, like this Baroque ornate frame that I found on the side of the street. It's really cool, actually. We should post a picture on the Patreon page. Anyways, I didn't mean to. I feel like Doctor Who always comes up somehow.
Yeah, and it always should.
All right.
I'm sorry. I feel like I just like scatterbrained us. Okay, yeah. I found this movie. So aside from all, I mean, I knew it was going to be offensive, right? Like the Libyans. Like how racist can you be? But I got kind of bored. Like in addition to being annoyed at these things, I was just kind of bored. Oh, I remember my third fact. What is wrong with me today?
I don't know, but
can we
I'm
start
glad
this
Teddy's in
podcast
the room
again?
with you. No, and not me.
Okay, the third fact that I wanted to share is that if I had a different body type, I want to dress like Marty McFly. The whole like rolled up like sleeves and then the suspenders. You can't have boobs and suspenders. It's very awkward.
Tough,
They have to like go around.
Yeah.
But I loved his like look.
I did too.
I did 3. I feel like the whole experience. So I rewatched the movie this week. I have seen it since childhood, but I don't remember when. Like I go back to this movie sometimes for whatever reason because I don't know. I keep coming on the podcast for like the welcome to another episode of like white people doing shitty things. With us this week is Teddy to comment on the topic. But I will say like the things that jump out to me on this rewatch are not the things I remember. Like when I rewatched it as an adult, I was like, wow, I thought this movie was about the DeLorean and time travel and like not completely about like my mom super wants to have sex with me and I haven't decided how I feel about it for the rest of the movie. But the tidbits that stood out to me were the guy who plays George McFly really brings it, and he like is such a goofy character. Also interesting that like all of the characters are such cartoons, except like I think it's actually interesting how fucking like absurdly cartoony all of them are. Everyone who's in the 50s, and somehow like the actors all play it straight enough that like I don't know. It's an interesting combination of like a really cartoony movie and somehow really grounded. And I don't know if that's because of like Michael J. Fox being like the straight man to these characters or what, but like that's what I know. Also, I noticed that I feel like Michael J. Fox does a lot more stunts than I expected. A lot of that skateboarding, I was like, that's him. Like grabbing onto the back of a car and then riding around on a skateboard around the back lot of Universal Studios.
Yeah. I on this
you can actually tour, like apparently I didn't know this. I watched it with a friend. You can actually like see that if you go to the Universal Studios tour, you can see that like courtyard area. And right next to it apparently is the Good Place. They added the Good Place one.
Oh, cool.
I'm like, now I want to go on this tour.
And then just flip off the clock tower from Back to the Future.
Yeah.
One of the things that I did like about this rewatch was all the skateboarding, because there was a real high point between like, I don't know, 83 and maybe like 96 or something, where I feel like if there was someone under the age of 18 in a movie, that person, to show that they were cool, right? They had like that extreme cool kid energy. They were going to be skateboarding. I missed that. I also really noticed Michael J. Fox has always had kind of a like young old man's face. Did you notice that? Like he could either be 20 or 45, depending upon the angle that you're looking at him at. And he had that for a long time. I love faces like that. You know?
Maybe that's the meta of the movie, because it's the same is true of the guy who plays Doc Brown, who is escaping me at this moment, where it's like he just looks the same in the 50s and the 80s, and they're like, that's just how he looks. Yeah,
exactly. Love it. Love it. It's like actors like Brian Cox. That dude has always been 55.
Which is funny to me that they did that with Doc Brown's character when they put fucking prosthetics and shit on everybody else.
Oh, yeah.
When they got older.
It was a wild time, Anita.
And you're just like, at first, because I kind of forgot the movie, and at first I was like, why did this family look weird? Why is everyone like kind of... And I was like, oh, these are prosthetics. Okay, that's what they decided to do here.
The ones that are the grossest are the fattening prosthetics.
Yeah.
Like, oh boy, we really got to talk about this. And I'm sure we will when it comes up, when we start talking about, American Horror Show and the conversation about Sarah Paulson wearing a fat suit to play Linda Tripp. And like, it's just gross, But Leah Thompson, she does this in 1985, and then Howard the Duck in 1986. She was just on a weirdo roll in the mid 80s. God bless.
Let's talk about that. Not that the fat suit stuff, because so there's so many. It's kind of This is one of those movies where like you're like, I loved it as a kid, and then I watched it as an adult and was like, whoa, that's a problem, right? And so there's lots of little lines in this movie that. You're just like, it's just super cringy. So, he's like celebrating that his mom didn't get fat in the new timeline, right? And you're like, fuck off, right? Like that's her biggest weakness is the way that she looks. And then, and
also the class stuff, like.
Yeah. And well, the other thing is that, so when George like gains confidence after like, and so George gains confidence by being violent and by being like out toughening the tough guy. So therefore he now is like a confident adult who makes a lot of money and has a good family, and his wife still loves him after all those years, which is probably bullshit. And that he overpowered Biff, who is now in the subservient role, right? Like everything just flipped because he gained confidence from punching somebody.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it was really frustrating. And then the other thing that was like, you know, we can talk, well, whatever. So he punches Biff and saves Lorraine from being raped by Biff, which is a horrifying scene that you're like, this is not, how is this family friendly?
Mm-hmm.
And oh my God, where did my thought go?
Horror, being horrified.
Yeah, you were left speechless and thoughtless. But no, you're absolutely right. Like, I mean, I have to say on this recent rewatch, at the same time that I was picking up on all of the problematic stuff that you're pointing out, I didn't hate the experience of rewatching the movie. There were still times when, you know, I laughed or had a good time. Christopher Lloyd, who plays Doc Brown, like, I just love that dude, you know? So I just love watching him be like his sort of, you know, weird glitchy self and everything. I loved like this sort of shouts out to like golden age sci-fi and the comics, you know, and with the kind of like, the whole alien thing, you know, when Marty goes back in time and comes out of the barn. Like, there's certain parts of it that I really did love.
I remember what I was going to say.
Great arm waving is happening.
Completely, I completely just lost it. Was that they spend a lot of time with Daddy McFly and Lorraine, George, I forgot his name, talking about like their origin story, right? And how boring it is. And it was that he got hit in front of his dad, hit him with a car, and she came in and she fell in love with him because of, you know, whatever reason that they say. And so they tell this story their whole life, their whole relationship to their kids. So the whole time I was like, what is their story now? Like, Biff tried to rape me and then your dad saved me? Like,
and then your father, in the ultimate act of love, employed my former rapist.
Right,
yeah.
Right?
Isn't that comfortable for me?
What on earth?
You know what's interesting is that there are so many science fiction stories, time travel stories, that hinge around a dude going back in time and potentially impregnating one of his female ancestors, whether it's his mother, his grandmother, whatever. I mean, and the one that comes to mind most quickly for me is like Futurama, but this pops up a bunch of times. I cannot think of a comparable number of instances, except for Octavia Butler's Kindred, in which a female time traveler goes back and potentially has sex with, one of her male ancestors. There's some Oedipal shit going on here. I'm convinced that we will perhaps unpack in the bonus. This has just occurred to me. So if this thought has not been fleshed out, 90% of it is probably bullshit, but...
That was kind of the core of my question coming out of rewatching it for this podcast, which is like, there's a whole bunch of stuff, like there's all the problematic shit, which we can and should talk about, right? And then there's just like the cinema of it. Like I went to USC for film school, and like I fucking got my master's in the Bob Zemeckis Center. Like so this movie is like very dug into like
so you had to watch it at freshman orientation.
Yeah, basically. Actually fucking the Bob Zemeckis was there. But
wow.
But my question rewatching it was like, I have a question. I'm like, you're telling me, Marty McFly, that, like, what is this movie about? Like, what is the movie actually?
Anita, how are you sitting still while that's happening right next to you?
I'm not. You just can't see me on camera.
Skateboards.
Also, Teddy's been doing this since they showed up at my house, so like the novelty of it is worn off.
It's real warmed up. That's why it's perfect. But like what is it? Because I was like, okay, I want to come in and have a real conversation. I'm like, I don't know what this. It's fun, and I like it, and I've obviously rewatched it. But I'm like, and like plenty of popcorn movies, especially big Hollywood movies, like don't really have an angle or whatever. But I'm like, what? Yeah, what is it? What's the surface angle here? Is it just like capitalism rewards sort of energy, where it's like, yeah, you gotta. He doesn't even like what's Marty's journey? What does Marty do at the end? I know Marty's journey in the 3 movies, and there is actually kind of a character arc, but in this one movie, like what changes?
I have no memory of the other 2 movies in the trilogy, except wasn't there a kind of like just kind of neon, weird, spacey no, wait, I'm confusing. Wasn't there like a Wild West setting at one point?
Yes. So the third
was
one
that 3?
That's 3. I can spoil, just for the purpose of talking about the arc thing, I can spoil one thing, which is like, there is kind of a theme that is especially leaned into in the third movie of like Marty being a little bit machismo, a little bit aggro. Like even in the first movie, they put a lot of attention on the fact that his father is not tough enough, and Marty is. Right away when you see Biff versus Marty, Marty's standing up to Goliath, you know? And that's like, we're supposed to like that. And in the third movie, by the end of it, in 2 and 3, they show like the consequences of Marty's machismo damning him and hurting him. And he makes,
are you serious?
Yeah, and he makes like a singular choice at the very end of the third movie to like not drag race someone in his car, which was like leads to an accident that leads to a lot of the bad shit that happens to him in the future. So like,
wait, so it's about masculinity in the end?
I don't know if it's about masculinity in the end, but like that is a thing that they try to make.
It's about masculinity in the beginning. You know what? We should have talked to you before this, and maybe we should have watched Back to the Future 3 instead.
I know,
you know,
right?
because this, I have zero memory of this, and this sounds fucking interesting to me.
I wonder if
don't make me watch this movie, Lord God. Now I'm gonna waste 2 hours this weekend watching Back to the Future 3.
I mean, yes, it's all about masculinity, and also in ways that most films are about masculinity, like these kinds of films. But I'm curious, like, is it an actual commentary of some sort on toxic masculinity? Right? Like, I don't have faith that it would do it well, but like that's interesting. And again, same Ebony. I don't want to watch these movies, but now I'm like, what?
They do beats like there's a thing they do in 2 and in 3, and in 2 there's the line chicken. Chicken. Nobody calls me chicken. And like leads him. That's when he gets like Biff will always get him riled up by calling him chicken. And then in the third movie he calls him Yella because they're in like they're in the Wild West or whatever. And he's like, Yella, nobody calls me Yella. And then like they get into a fight. So there is like moments where they're specifically kind of twisting the knife on Marty's masculinity, and they show him choose not to react. So they are doing it intentionally, but I don't know if that informs the first movie at all, or whether that's like a
and you're right. Like, what
movie.
is the character development of Marty? Like, there is none. He's the same from the beginning to the end. His family just got better, so he's like rewarded for his historical tampering. Also, can we talk about how deeply disturbing it is that his mother has a crush on him and wants to fuck him?
Yeah.
Like, it's so uncomfortable. And I was watching it with a friend, and I made a joke about like, well, your mom just wants to fuck you. And I was like, and we both just like cringed. It was like, that's not even funny. Like, it's just uncomfortable.
It is gross. But I do recall at a certain point watching, because I've seen this movie tons of times. There was a period when, leaving off the fact that the object of her desire is her son, the fact that we see a teenage girl being like, sexually voracious, and expressing desire, I did find really interesting, although there is lots of talk about what a proper girl does too, So as we see Lorraine older, she talks about like, good girls don't go driving or whatever she says. And then of course the joke is that she was the kind of girl who would willingly, jump into someone's pants. But there's so much there if you don't just leave it at funny time travel hijinks. There's so much going on. Some of it really, really gross, and some of it potentially could be interesting. But
and that point about like, you're right. They're historically, especially these older. It's 80s. It's not, but movies just don't show women, or there's very little healthy representations of women showing like sexual desire. It's one of the reasons why I love Dirty Dancing, because she actually like initiates and wants and like controls her own sexuality in a lot of ways. But it's so hard to like, there's so many caveats to get to that point in understanding that in this movie, that you're like, because there's no part of us that's like, you go girl, do your thing. I don't know why I said it like that, but like you like, hey, good for you. Like, you're controlling your sexuality, because it's like, but you're putting it in the wrong direction. And because
and also
she's
the way she goes about it is so aggressive and gross to Marty.
Well, and also, right, exactly. So it's really not like, there's no consent reading around your partner's interests or your potential partners. But also, she's framed as this total ditzy, stupid, like, I just like the shiny thing in front of me. So like, you're tough and masculine. I like you, right?
Yeah, it does feel like maybe the movies are like think that it's like this weird one eye blind thing. Is that a thing? Third eye blind?
Third eye
One
blind?
I don't know what that actually means, besides loving that album. But like, that it thinks that it's interrogating masculinity or machismo, but
absolutely.
with a complete blindness to the lens of like, oh, but this has anything to do with our relationship with women, right? Like, and also like not to just keep going to the other movies, but if you want to be fucking mad about how they treat women, like in the second movie, so at the end of the first, Jennifer, this is all spoilers, right? Jennifer and Marty get in Doc's car and where we're going, we don't need roads. I don't work to my Doc impression. Doc, why can't we? We gotta make 8 miles an hour.
Wait. What's my Doc impression? Oh, Ronald Reagan, the actor?
Yeah, he becomes the president.
Oh my gosh.
They get in the car and Doc's like, she can come too. And then what happens in the second movie is like literally the moment they get into the future, Jennifer gets knocked unconscious. I don't remember if it's intentional or not. I feel like Doc like sprays her, knocks her unconscious, hides her in the car. The car gets stolen, so she's like unconscious and damseled. And then at the end of the movie, she like wakes back up again and like doesn't remember.
Wow,
Like,
so they just sidelined her for the whole movie. Damn.
Yeah.
Amazing. That tracks with cinema of that time.
Yeah. But it does seem like, but at the same time, they're like trying to interrogate Marty's machismo, yeah, but not in a way where it's like talking about gender in a larger way.
Yeah.
It's just trying to turn a single dial on.
But I mean, like
masculinity
the questioning of masculinity is the assertion, and I mean, yes, this is common for the 80s, and we've gotten a little bit more sophisticated in hiding it these days, but it's still definitely the rule of the day. It is a very white, middle class questioning of a certain kind of masculinity, right? So we talked about, you know, how Marty is uncomfortable with his family for reasons of like their class markers, you know, which is written as like, these people are tacky, they're trashy. Some of them are fat, you know, like their tastes are excessive and inappropriate. And, you know, they are unable to either provide for their family or protect their families in ways that are appropriate. And I say they, I mean like George McFly, right? And so the version of masculinity that the film valorizes is just as horrible, but because it has those the sort of trappings of a more appropriate, like it's clothed in more appropriate, you know, wrappings, it gets accepted. And we're supposed to be happy that, you know, Marty, by doing what he does in the past, has elevated his father and hence his family, you know, into a better life. So yeah, I think the film does think that it's saying like, oh yeah, there is something wrong with men who are like Biff. But the problem with Biff is not that like he's assertive, you know, it's that he's assertive in the wrong ways, or that he doesn't enact, you know, violence or his class prestige in the right ways, you know, but if you do it in the right way, it's just fine. Teddy worked too hard on those last impressions, y'all. Got to recharge.
I don't know what's going on.
Teddy and I just like made eyes at each other about who was going to go first. And then as soon as I was like, go ahead, Teddy's like, I'm dying now. Is that enough time for you to adjust?
No, we're back. Give me 10 seconds. I was just going to say, yeah, like, and that aligns with everyone else's like win at the end too, right? Like his brother is now financially more successful. His sister, like the gag at the beginning is like, I'm not your answering machine for answering like your girlfriend called. And at the end, it's like, oh, all these boys are calling her. So like all the men get money and all the women get men.
What is it? The high tide floats all boat.
A rising tide.
Yeah. There's another joke that I think fits into this classist analysis that you're providing too, and it's the joke about prison. So when he goes back and he sees his uncle as a baby, so in the beginning, it's like his uncle is in prison and they've never met him before, and when he's a baby, he says like, better get used to those bars from his playpen. And then there's like, they just dig it in even further where the parent is like, he just doesn't want to get out of that playpen. He loves being in there. And you're like, I had to kind of do a double take in some ways being like, are you, wow.
It is amazing the way he is able, the film tells us that Marty is basically responsible for everything good that happens in this town. He's responsible for Goldie deciding to run for mayor later. He's essentially the de facto inventor of rock and roll by stealing Chuck Berry's music and playing like everything good that happens in the town post 1955.
Which
is responsible. Marty McFly's responsible for.
The rules of time travel in this movie are a little bit confused because, like,
the rules.
Yeah, like it's kind of all over the place. It's like you can't change anything, and if you change something or if you interfere, you change something. But so like, what's his face gonna run for mayor before he put that in his head or not? Like, there's just all these things that you're like, what is the rules of time travel happening? It
feels a lot more like a fantasy movie than a science fiction movie in that regard.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
That shit about the white kid inventing rock and roll, I died. And then the call at the end where it's like, "Yo, Chuck, it's your cousin, blah blah blah, Barry," and you're like,
Listen
"Oh my
to
god,
this." Yeah.
oh my god." Do you think Michael J. Fox was really playing the guitar?
I think he was, actually. I think he does play guitar. Because didn't he play guitar in Teen Wolf 2? Teen Wolf 1 and Teen Wolf, 2.
I guess that's another trapping of late 80s, early 90s protagonists, right? You got a skateboard. Well, they fucking cut in every time he does the kick up where he kicks the skateboard into his own hand. They always cut to it. They're like, we got to show him do this cool kick.
Listen, I would demand that. If I was Michael J. Fox, like at the height of, whatever
Wolf
show
Kingdom.
he was on, like the height of that fame, I absolutely would have demanded the same thing. Man, I used to love Michael J. Fox. I used to love the movie The Secret of My Success. You want to talk about problematic faves? Holy shit. Anita, I'm going to make you sit and watch that with me. Teddy, were you born when this movie came out?
I was.
Okay.
I was. I mean, I did not.
I just feel like everybody on this, everybody
being.
we ever have on here is, 20 years younger than me, so.
I mean,
feel like
Teddy and I are the same generation.
It does the same thing with
teenagers.
same gen.
Basically.
I feel like the movie does the same thing in quotes, because, but with race as it does with gender or sex, which is like, there's a moment I forgot about, which is the movie thinking that it's doing something like cool or woke, which is like, the bad teens grab Marty and like throw him into the trunk of a car. And then they have that moment where like the band members, the black band get out of the car and like scare away the punk kids. And you're supposed to, in that moment, you're like, yeah, the movie's rooting for them. And I think the white kids use like a fucked up slur. I don't remember what they say, but like, and then, but that's in the context of it having Marty invent rock and roll and shit, where it's like, it thinks it's checking a box. It's like, cool, we're paying attention.
There's so much racism in this movie. Like what I was commenting in the beginning, the Libyans are coming who are the terrorists, and they speak gibberish, and and that is just one of the long legacy of the way that like Arabs show up or Middle Easterners or North African show up in Hollywood films constantly as the evil terrorists who are trying to get plutonium to like build a bomb to whatever, and then they kill Doc Brown, and like they're so evil, those brown people, It's awful. And so I actually forgot about that too, and was like, oh God, there's that. There's also what was another thing? The music one was a big one. And everything about race felt very pronounced. So you're just like, oh, what am I saying? That when there was someone who was of color in this movie, it was very like intentionally to fit a role. Yeah. So like the server or the the sort of busboy, quote unquote, at the diner, right, is there because he's going to be the future to show that like black people, it gets better for them. Isn't that cool? You can be mayor of this shitty town that's falling apart too. So just things like that, and like the same thing you were saying about that band, right?
Yeah. There is a whole, please come to my PhD thesis dissertation defense about how Doc Brown represents Silicon Valley. Because I'm just realizing that another thing about Doc Brown I totally forgot. One thing I zeroed in on, which is not, this is just like fun thing, which is like that fucking car that Marty takes to prom or whatever, or to the Under the Sea dance, is beautiful.
Whose car is it?
Rolls Royce. I think it's Doc's, because Doc, they have that brief thing at the beginning. It's like Doc is from a rich family, and I think the whole family died, or like their house burned down or something. And Doc is a disgraced, let's say at the beginning of the newspaper, he's a disgraced physics professor. So I think he just has he's got a lot of money. Yeah. And he's fucking up everyone's lives with technology. And he's charming.
He is charming. I do love Doc Brown.
And he's grooming the next generation of Marty is the young startup kid. I don't know where I'm going with this. This is not actually a valid theory.
This is we'll take it up in the bonus when we go back to my Oedipal argument. We're still working this out.
I do want to shout out. So back to your Oedipal argument, but more about like time travel stories about like women or not men, that just historically have always centered men, and if there are women, they get thrown in the fucking trunk of a car and they don't get to be in the movie, right? So we did an episode a while ago now with Annalee Newitz, who, when we talked about time travel and feminist time travel specifically, because they wrote a book about feminist time travel that's actually kind of interesting and fun. There isn't an insemination thing, so I didn't bring it up when you said it. But I want to link that in the show notes, because if you were interested in thinking about and hearing someone who is way smarter than us talk about time travel narratives in media, it was a good episode. Also, we need to stop saying we're not smart, Ebony. I feel like we should just feel like it's too much.
Listen.
I'm like, it's like every other word. Ever since Carolyn left, we're like, we don't know things anymore.
Well, but people understand we're hedging our bets, because sometimes I get lucky and I'll say something and it makes sense. But the vast majority of the time, I'm just throwing darts at a board and just hoping it lands anywhere in the circle.
I asked someone to be on the podcast, and they were like, well, I don't like, I'm not like y'all. Like, I'm not like, trained and really know what I'm talking about. I have opinions. I was like, what do you think we do?
Yeah.
What do you think this podcast is?
Yeah. It's Anita sharing pickle recipes.
I mean, to be fair, we do bring with us some expertise in having been in like this media criticism space for so long, but still, like, half the time it's like, I liked this line and the clothes was cool.
Mm-hmm. And here's the hair report.
Oh yeah, hair report. Well, there's no hair report in this one.
Good hair in this movie. Here's another hot take about this movie, which is that I'm still thinking about like what it's supposed to be saying, or if it is saying anything. I'm like, oh, this movie kind of feels like a video game, like in this, or like in the trappings of quote unquote traditional or like historically video game narrative, where it's like this movie has a lot of really cool nouns and verbs. Like it like the setting is really.
What is nouns and verbs? Can you explain
that?
Like
it has a lot of like things you can itemize and be like, like in the second movie is famous for the hoverboard, or the first movie you've got like the skateboarding and the DeLorean, or like just like nouns that are really flashy and shiny and interesting, and all the production design, and then just like verbs of like everything Marty does is just, I don't know, like physical achievement most of the time. Like most of the wins that anybody has are they land the punch or they skateboard, and so like the story. This is coming in hot. But like, but consequently, like the story is there to serve those nouns and verbs, and like it seems like maybe it's trying and failing very poorly to eke out like, oh, we're paying attention to race issues, or we're paying attention to gender politics, right. But it's like it has to serve the nouns and verbs that are its raison d'être.
I love that framing of nouns and verbs. I've never heard of that before. I like that, and I think it's very similar to or rather, it's of a piece with what I was trying to say before about the way in which the film really kind of celebrates a very pulpy science fiction kind of past, right? Because there's something that's very similar about the way that comic books often work with nouns and verbs. Just like the splashy design, and then the kinetic action on the page that has to be carried page by page. That's very interesting. I like that. Teddy, you can come back on the show.
Yes. Thanks. I'm going to be back. I'm going to keep doing this voice.
Oh my God, please do.
There is a weird that like Ebony, you're talking about, which is like, there's a weird thing that I've heard from like Hollywood screenwriter friends that like the theory is that Hollywood is always infatuated with 30 years prior. It's like you talk about like, oh, it would be 1991, but like, yeah, that is what like a lot of things are doing. And this movie is a contemporary with like the Indiana Jones movies, which Ebony, you were also just talking about pulp comics, and it's like, well, that movie is pulp comics. Yeah. And also made in the 80s. I don't know what there is to glean from this, but I think it's like...
No, it's true. The way that we always like look... Yeah. Sorry.
Which also makes it seem like part of the premise, like, it's just a movie that's very pitched on that, too.
That's also like our like vintage in general does that. So right now there's a lot of 90s fashion, right? Like that's... Or like the last couple of years have been pushing into 90s fashion. So it makes sense that... film and media are orbiting around that as well.
And this may be obvious to people who have studied this, But I wonder if there's a reason for that particular segment of time being a kind of natural chunk for this nostalgia bath that people like to take. And that you get to a certain point in your career as a decision maker, in Hollywood, for instance, late 30s, mid 40s, 30 years ago is when you were a teenager. And, you're looking back on that time with a particular fondness, and so, of course, the nostalgia that's going to activate you the most is the stuff from that period. And so you have people who are like, in their 40s and 50s or whatever, and they're like, the time from when I was 12 to when I was 22, that was when life was the best. And so that's what I'm going to keep returning to. So maybe there is something about like 30 years roughly in particular for why this sort of keeps happening all the time.
That tracks.
That tracks a lot in my head. I mean, like, I see that in video games, but it's a slightly faster cycle because games skews a little younger in terms of who has control. But like, you see games that emulate like a game from 20, like, there were a lot of platformers coming out like about 20 years after Mario and Sonic. And then like you're starting to see things like, people who are emulating PlayStation 1 games or Shadow of the Colossus, where it's like, what did you grow up with? What do you have like rose-colored glasses about?
Right.
That makes sense.
That totally makes sense. Yeah. All right.
Cool. We did it.
Yeah. We'll go for it.
I'm just I'm just gonna start jump scaring all my friends.
All right, we'll be back with some freakouts.
What's up, FFR listeners? We've got so much great conversation coming your way this month on Feminist Frequency Radio. Why not sign up to get early access and bonus episodes? Oh, and help us keep making the show? Head on over to patreon.com/femfreak today and sign up.
What's your freak out?
Now it's time to talk about what's been thrilling us, moving us, upsetting us, or infuriating us this past week. Ebony, what you got?
I read a great Twitter thread today, the day that we're recording this. And today is a few days after the Texas abortion ban went into effect. So I will share the link to this Twitter thread because I'm blanking on the handle of the person who twoted it. But essentially, it is this wonderful thread in which this writer tackles all of the common arguments against abortion bans like this or against pro-life declarations. These arguments that don't actually serve the cause, that in fact really undercut it in a lot of ways. And so essentially this writer is like, don't keep saying this stuff because you're not helping, So one of the things that she says is, don't emphasize or don't assert that having an abortion is a hard decision, for everybody. For some people it's not, Don't paint this picture that it's this agonizing thing that pregnant people only do as a last resort and that it traumatizes them forever and it's horrible, but we're so grateful. It's like, for some people it is an easy decision, She talks about how we need to, normalize saying that, like, I am pro-abortion, not just pro-choice, but I am pro-abortion. She talks about the kind of like tongue-in-cheek jokes that people make during times like this when they say things like, oh, well, and they say men, as opposed to like, the impregnator, the inseminator. But, oh, well, until this kind of stuff gets straightened out, all men should have vasectomies, And she's like, no, the whole point is bodily autonomy, even as a joke. You're shifting that over to the window in which you are asserting that a certain type of like authority over someone else's body is thinkable. We want all of this, curtailing of bodily autonomy to be unthinkable. So it was a really great Twitter thread. I think it was incredibly well laid out and super fulsome about, these kind of things that we say kind of off the cuff, remarks that we make in our moment of horror and fear when legislation like this is passed. And it's good to remember how important our framing is. I'll share the Twitter thread, and I wish I had a better memory so I could tell you right off the bat who the writer was, but we'll make sure you have access to it.
Great. Sorry, I wasn't just yawning.
Yeah.
Okay, I actually am going to have a freak out that is related to reproductive rights because I have been looking into getting an IUD, which is a very a very basic standard birth control method. Or I mean, it's used for lots of different reasons, but it is in the category of birth control. And I have been having a hell of a time trying to figure out how to fucking get it, which was shocking to me because I don't, whatever, people don't need to know about my history, but I don't really use hormonal birth controls and that sort of thing. So it's just been really frustrating to me because like I know that our healthcare system sucks. I know that I pay out of pocket for my shitty health insurance that literally has the highest deductible ever, so it's useless to me. But I don't usually go to the doctor and I don't usually have any like needs at the doctor. So it's just annoying. Right. And I think about, I've been going through this process and I think about the people who have like $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 worth of medical expenses that have people like the fact that we are still have no health care, like universal health care. And the best thing that we have is I don't want to call it Obamacare. What's it called? The AHD. Affordable Care Act, ACA.
Yes. AHD.
I was like, okay. So like, I've been on the phone with customer service of multiple different places for 2 days. And like Ebony has been like, call this place, talk to this place. Because the thing is, if I want to spend $1,000 or more, I could go to Planned Parenthood and get it right now. But if I want my insurance to cover it, I like have to wait 6 months until there's like an appointment time. And I didn't even think my insurance was covering it because I got multiple information from different agents that were wrong. You know what I mean? Like it's just, I know that I'm very privileged and I'm very lucky in this space, but like the shit should not be this fucking hard, right? It should not be hard to get basic support in any kind of thing that you need to do around healthcare and health insurance. But specifically when I'm thinking about the rolling back of birth control, of reproductive rights, it's like, well, is this shit going to disappear too at some point? Are we not going to have access to this stuff? And like being in California, so far, we're pretty lucky. I don't know what's going to happen with this recall, which is another thing we could freak out about. But anyways, whatever, that was rambling. I'm just annoyed. I've been literally just been on hold. Like I actually called Planned Parenthood today. I was on hold for 40 minutes and then it cut off. It was just like, we're having problems with their system. Goodbye. Yeah. And I'm like, fuck.
Yeah, I'm sure they are having problems with their system. You know, all of these people now desperate to get information. It's fucked up. And you shouldn't have to have a friend like me to be like, oh, you're having this inserted up your hoo-ha? Let me tell you about my experience and why it should be free. What if you don't have an Ebony in your life?
I know. And I was about to go spend $1,000 on this thing. And Ebony was like, yo, like there are other ways. And so one, the LA Planned Parenthood, like, you know, whatever. I am now like calling different counties of different counties of my health insurance because they all do things differently. And it's just, and they have different like helplines. So you have to talk to, it's so maddening.
Yeah.
Yes. And after all of this, I am fully expecting to be charged for it, even though I was told by one person that I'm not, right?
Yeah, I can build on this, but like on the grander topic of just healthcare, if that's cool. I don't want to take it away from reproductive rights, but like I think, I mean, I would imagine like many of the listeners here are already kind of like on board with like, yeah, there should be better public or any public healthcare, but like, I just to kind of like nail the point home, I feel like something for me as someone who probably was like pretty ignorant of this for a long time was being abroad or living in Canada even, right? Because I was like, yeah, it's so expensive and it's so hard and it's very easy to kind of just get in that rhetoric of like, yeah, this should be better. And it's like, no, it really, the ramifications on every axis are so bizarre. And like the two anecdotes that come to mind for me in Canada are like, this is so relatively trivial, but it can cause people harm. Is like, I was at a party and someone had like, maybe no one knew, right? Someone was feeling sick. It was like, had they had too much to drink or were they having food poisoning from what they ate earlier? And all my instincts as a United States citizen were to be like, okay, let's get them water. Let's sit them down and talk to them. Maybe lay them down, make sure it's on their side so they don't fucking die if they throw up, like things like that. And everyone in the room's instinct there, who are all Canadians, was, oh, just call 911. I was like, really? Like they could just like sleep it off or sit it off or like, no, just call 911. And 911 came in 5 minutes. And they sat down with her for a while and talked to her. And they spend like 20 minutes, and eventually they took her out on a stretcher just to because she needed attention, and probably cost her like $5 or $20. And I think there's so much of a reluctance to do that, or like seeing an unhoused person on the street who was like clearly in a bad way, and people walked by and saw them and immediately called them an ambulance and like got them some care because they were concerned about them. And those are things where like you don't do that here because you're like, you don't even know what happens if you like, are they going to have debt, and what is that going to do to them? And like there's just this fear or this resistance around healthcare.
And if you call, they might not even help them. Right? Like they might just like be like, what? We don't know. What does that mean? Whatever.
Right. Or it could lead to doing harm to them even.
Yeah.
Like if the police get involved.
Yeah. I have been that person that has refused an ambulance. I had a seizure while on vacation many years ago and was beyond broke. This was a trip that would have been paid for by someone else, by the way. And I was just like, if I die, I die. I cannot have a $30,000 bill on top of everything else,
which is
and
just
this
horrifying.
decision. I was in a place, sort of, where I could refuse the ambulance, and I definitely shouldn't, but again, it happened years ago now. But having to make that determination when you're in the midst of, a horrific experience, or being the family member or a loved one or a friend or just a passerby, who knows, and it's just like, I have to make a determination that very well may have ramifications for this person's life. And I have to make this determination about whether they can pay for care. What are we doing?
It's wild. It's wild. I mean, I grew up in Canada, so I come from that space where you're just like, cool, you go to the doctor if you need to go to the doctor. You go to the hospital if you need to go to the hospital. And like, I moved here and was like, I don't understand. I just talked to someone yesterday who's like, I just turned 25 and I'm really worried what I'm going to do because I can't be on my parents' health insurance anymore. And I'm like, that's real. Like, why? Yeah. It's wild to me. And like, when you travel and like, even when you go, when I'm in Scandinavia or talk to anyone else in the world that lives in not even Western countries, universal healthcare is in a lot of places that are much less economically stable than America. And so I don't know. I find it extremely frustrating, and I know that I'm really lucky. But I know I spent most of my 20s not having health insurance. I just was like, I can't afford this. I'm not paying for it. And then it wasn't until the ACA where I was like, well, fuck, you're gonna fine me for not having it? Fuck off. That made me really mad.
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe like it can feel like we're trotting familiar ground in these conversations, but it can't be reinforced enough. Like how it's not pipe dreaming. It's like, no, it really is just way.
But how do we? It's not pipe dreaming.
Very feasible. Yeah.
But how do we get to a place where we institute these things when, like, we can't even get half the population vaccinated? Do you know what I mean? Yeah. Like the part of the problem is that these are institutions that have historically been put in place in countries for decades and decades, right? Yeah. And so, like libraries, if you pitched the government to have a library today, they would think you were fucking nuts. Yeah. There's no way a library would happen under our current state of capitalism. So like trying to get universal healthcare in is almost impossible because you have these really intense political divides. You have like, what people call late stage capitalism, like interfering in this space. You have all of these people in power, both governmental and the insurance companies, and they like, it's not going to fucking happen. Yeah. There's too many powerful people who are just like, well, I'm fine. And we will lose money, right? So,
and not just I'm fine and I don't care about others, but let's be honest. There is absolutely a death cult operational in this country in which the work of capitalism is devoted to eliminating undesirables. Undesirables being people who are poor, who are, communities of color and whatever. Like, it is the point of the system. It is a feature, not a bug. It's not just like collateral damage that, is, oh, it's so sad that happened. Who could have foreseen it? It is doing exactly what it's supposed to do.
And the other thing I'm thinking about bringing it back around to reproductive rights, which is how this conversation started, was that like we have been in, I'd say almost 40 years, but like, 20 to 30 year period where we have been just trying to hold on to the shit that our ancestors and our, whatever fought for, or like previous generations of activists fought for. So like what's happening in Texas around abortion is illegal according to Roe v. Wade, right? Like it is actually illegal, but it doesn't matter because by the time that makes it through the courts, how many thousands of people is that going to affect? And by the time it makes it to the courts, our Supreme Court has been stacked over the last 40 years with super conservatives who would be more than happy to overturn Roe v. Wade, which is just mind-boggling. So it's just like, these things do not exist in a vacuum. The political machinations of this country, like Kavanaugh became the Supreme Court justice because there was 40 years of a plan by the Republicans to put, he was like the next in line. And the Republicans have been working on this plan to make sure that they start stacking the government in more conservative ways. And he was just the next in line.
Yeah.
Right? It didn't matter that he's a rapist and an abuser and a horrible fucking predator. It don't matter. He was next in line. Yeah. So, those things are not separated from all of the attacks on our reproductive rights happening in many states. It's just Texas is the most restrictive, and it just went into effect a few days ago. So that's part of why we're talking about it right now. But like, look at Ohio. Like before, Texas was one of the most restrictive abortion abilities to access abortion of the entire country. So
that brings up a minor quick thing, which is just like on the topic of things that can't be reinforced enough, and on the topic of things I know I used to be ignorant to, is being involved in local politics.
Yes,
like we, I feel like there's been a lot more conversation over the last year or so about that. But like in California, we have this shitty governor re-election, or not re-election, recall happening right now, where it's like, okay, you have to be involved. And same, like watching a state's choice, watching Texas's choice, potentially or actively damage like the entire country and set a bad precedent, is also like a reminder that we need to participate in our state elections and in our gubernatorial elections and mayoral elections, and like just do the minimal reading it takes to make sure that your vote is counted on these things, because that is how anything moves forward, right? And even on the topic of healthcare, I'm sure if there were any world in which we get there, it's not going to be the federal government being like, hey, we have a great plan that's going to stick. It's going to be some state is going to do it, and all the other states are going to be like, it's going to be like fucking political FOMO.
Well, but that's
right?
how the ACA happened. Is Massachusetts did it first, and it was a fucking disaster.
Really,
it was a disaster because if you were like the way that I only heard about it from other people and their experiences with it, but that model kind of started there in some way. Please correct me if I'm wrong, because I know that Massachusetts did this and then it became like sort of the federal model, but I don't know if other states had done it before or previously or whatever. But I'm not one for like get out the vote. That's just not really my activism and my politics. But I totally agree around local elections, and like things like the California recall, I think are really important to vote on because it feels more tangible. It actually does feel more like our vote matters in this particular context. And I voted and I got a text message saying that they received my ballot. And I was like, why can't we do this federally?
Yeah, me too.
Why can't it be like, it's just such a mess. So,
it can be, I think, intimidating for some people who've only ever done the like, oh, I vote for the president every 4 years, because when you start saying like, get involved in local politics, they think like, oh, I got to join an organization and there's going to be emails. It's like, it's really just incremental. It's just like, hey, there's another election. Pay attention to that one. You're going to see in your Instagram, someone says, hey, this election day is coming up. Take 10 seconds and put it in your calendar.
Well, and the other thing is that in California, for the recall at least, anyone who was already registered got a ballot in the mail. You didn't have to do anything about it. Like, why don't we do that for the whole fucking... Oh, okay, enough. Sorry. This became the Country Sucks podcast. This isn't even talking about everything else that's happening in the world right now. I mean, in the country, that's horrifying.
Doc, we got to go back in time and fix the country, fix healthcare.
If you want to rant about healthcare or politics or climate catastrophes or leaving a war zone and then being like, not our problem, or leaving a war that we started and being like, not our problem, what?
The moral of Back to the Future is... if Marty McFly had gotten hit by that car and there'd been better public health care, then he wouldn't have had to been treated by Lorraine and her family, and she would have never fallen for him. So if they could have just called him an ambulance and sent him away to be taken care of, he would have never almost had sex with his mom.
There it is, everybody.
We got it.
We worked our way around to it.
If you want to submit your own freak out, you can do that at feministfrequency.com/freakout, FREQOUT. Thanks so much for listening to us. I'm sorry that I was on this podcast at all and that you made it this far. Teddy, where can folks find you?
They can find me, Teddy Dief, TEDDYDIEF, on Twitter and all social medias. Also, OFK is OFK Band everywhere, and you can search OFK on Spotify or your chosen music platform because their first single is out.
Amazing. That's it for this episode and actually for the season. So we're going to be back in 4 weeks with a bunch of new hot takes and new guests, maybe some old guests, but also some new guests. In the meantime, you can go re-listen to some of our early episodes, like the one we did on Call Me By Your Name or Ready Player One, especially if you like to hear Ebony just lose her mind with frustration. And if you miss Carolyn, that's a good way to get a little dose of Caro in your life. Our show is engineered by Rob Parra. Carrie Stimson provides technical support, artwork by Jamie Varon, and our intro music is by Phil Circus. Thanks for listening.
Bye.
Bye.